An elder once told me that the earth is a living human being. All of the water and the natural resources, like the oil that flows in her, is like her blood. The trees and the grass are her hair.
My immunity is directly linked to the Earth's immunity. We're inseparable.
With the pandemic, I see it as connected to the overclearing of land on industrial scales, for intensive agriculture, for mining. And that in turn, obviously disrupts habitats, destroys biodiversity.
And the pandemic is a perfect example of the consequences of that. As far as we know, the pandemic arose in these limestone caves where bats were living. Bats have lived with viruses it's deep in their lineage. They've co-evolved with these viruses, but human beings have been sort of out of that picture. As human beings have depleted biodiversity, there's less checks and balances, and so the virus has less enemies, as it were.
And that means the transfer of zoonotic viruses across species barriers, new ones that never happened before because we weren't in that contact before.
It's a bigger problem of humans occupying almost everywhere on Earth and not leaving any space for animals to be. Humans occupying so much space that a virus can move from China to the tip of Argentina in like 6-7 days. That possibility was created because we think that the world is made for us. And that's a disconnect, right? And with that comes that ego and sense of control.
As if the world's there for us and we reign it, we reign over it. The notion of man's dominion on it. And I find that completely delusional, but also incredibly dangerous.
And so I see the pandemic arising really as a perfect example of human beings trying to kind of control everything. And the pandemic is arresting us and grabbing us and saying, hey, wake up.
It's that kind of shaken to your bones feeling of impotence. And it's just a recognition moment that we live on such a powerful, dynamic planet, and reduces us to an organism or a collection of organisms that, are totally vulnerable. It's very hard for us in the West to feel our vulnerability to a living planet.
We've never been without the unknown. Never. We've never been without uncertainty, but we're all acting like this is sort of the first time we've, so it's just like all in our face. I don't think it's been easy for anyone.
So it's very difficult for people during this time who are really control freaks to accept what is happening because they have no control. But that's part of the gift that we are all being given, to reconnect to nature, to reconnect to Mother Earth, reconnect to the trees, reconnect to the plants. We are all related, and we shouldn't separate ourselves from nature.
You're off nature, right? Like you're not in it, like you're off it. And you sit down and pause and allow that thought to sit and kind of like accept it and introspect on it. You start realizing that you're not an isolated being.
So I do think that all this stuff is about us deepening our fingers, our toes, our minds into the world.
When things became a little bit too chaotic, I would, take my shoes off and go outside and just ground myself to the earth. Something as simple as that is just being out in nature, taking a walk.
And you can do this in the city as well. It doesn't have to be out in the country or in the bush, as we call it. All environments, including urban environments, are teeming with all sorts of life, and just kind of notice it and see how it works, how it operates. You can learn so much just by hanging out in the world and noticing what else is happening.
And listen to the leaves of the tree that are rustling, hearing the birds singing. You hear the wind making a shoo, shoo. And sometimes if we're quiet enough and we're still enough, we can read the messages in what nature is trying to teach us.
If we can sort of think differently about who we are in relation to everything else and stop separating ourselves off from the rest of the world, but see how we're kind of inextricably entangled and entwined with everything else that's around us, the forces, the entities, the other life forms. It's all this big sort of dance and play of life, and we're just a part of that.
And it's the connection to me that is the potency of life. It's that connectedness. And I'm constantly amazed at this world we live in.